Today on the Arizona Report, we're going to talk about Airbnb and the politics of short-term rentals in Arizona, coming up right now. Thank you for joining us. My name is David Meek. I'm a licensed Arizona real estate broker, and you're watching the Arizona Report. I have a guest today on the phone. His name is Patrick Mcqueen. Patrick is the founding partner of Mcqueen and Gottlieb in downtown Phoenix. He's a real estate attorney and the most knowledgeable person who I know at the intersection of short-term rentals in Arizona and the law. Patrick, welcome to the Arizona Report.
Thanks so much, David. Happy to talk.
Thank you. For somebody who's just kind of tuning in, what is a short-term rental, and what's the definition of how a short-term rental really is not a, would you say, more than 30-day period?
That's true. That's right. And so we don't really have a concrete definition of what it is to be a short-term rental, but generally it's 30 days or less. So there's a lot of people out there who do we want to call these rentals? Do we want to call these licenses? What do we really want to call these? Because if we call them a true rental, we're sort of indicating that there may be some sort of landlord-tenant relationship, which then allows or requires an eviction action, and so you run into all sorts of trouble trying to define what we're actually talking about. So it's interesting. We pick up problems right away by calling it a rental when maybe it's not even a rental. We don't even know the law on that yet.
And this is uncharted territory in Arizona. There are people on the landlord side probably watching this video, and people on the agitated neighbor side. A lot of people, I think I saw a statistic recently, $51 million in revenue for Arizona short-term hosts through Airbnb just a year or two ago. That's a lot of money. So it's a new area. There isn't a lot of law, and there's a little bit of confusion. So what is the general state of laws right now that you've seen in Arizona regarding short-term rentals?
Sure. So we're bringing our laws from any number of sources. We have two statutes that basically say cities and counties can't do anything to prohibit short-term rentals.
Okay.
We have CC&Rs that basically, say you can or cannot have short-term rentals, and then we have zoning laws, and so we're sort of at an intersection of or a mix of where laws are coming from.
And CC&Rs, for someone who might not be familiar with that, what is that?
Well, we have CC&Rs or deed restrictions. And those are documents that are recorded against properties, and they basically outline what it is you can or cannot do with your property. And some deed restrictions and some CC&Rs basically say you can't have a hotel. You can't have chickens in your backyard.
Right.
You have to have this color around of your house. And so they restrict what you can and cannot do. And so what a lot of people right now are trying to do is either put CC&Rs or deed restrictions on certain properties or amend them in such a way so that short-term rentals or VRBOs are much more regulated.
And homeowners associations, the HOAs, are scrambling to amend these covenants, conditions, and restrictions to address the short-term rental situation, because there are many upset homeowners who are finding themselves next door inside a homeowners association to a rental property, short-term rental.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we have several statutes that address what counties and cities can do, and then I also mentioned that HOAs can also regulate in this area. And one of the ways in which they regulate is by either amending CC&Rs to prohibit this type of stuff, or restrict it considerably. And so we see a lot of HOAs that are scrambling right now to figure out what vote is required to amend the CC&Rs, whether there's enough impetus among the members and the homeowners within an HOA to amend the CC&Rs to restrict VRBOs and Airbnbs and those sorts of things. And so the HOAs are an enforcement mechanism. If there is a violation, that's one way you can go if you're within an HOA and you believe that there's been a violation of CC&Rs. But even the policing on that can be somewhat weak.
Is that an easy path, or what's the threshold for amending CC&Rs if you live inside a homeowners association in Arizona?
It can be pretty tough. So the CC&Rs will usually spell out a required number or a required percentage of the homeowners that need to vote, and then of those voting folks, how many of those voting folks, how many of those voting owners approve or disapprove of the proposed amendment. So in some instances, you have to have up to 75%. Some instances, you have to have 100% of the homeowners vote to amend them. So it can be quite difficult.
If you're on the agitated neighbor side of an Airbnb or a short-term rental, that's still a hard path, even though it is your homeowners association. That threshold's pretty high. We have Governor Doug Ducey here in Arizona. He is a huge fan of the sharing economy, and he was behind, a couple of years ago, Senate Bill 1350. Can you tell me what that is and how it affects short-term rentals?
Yeah, well, that was basically the bill that said, hey, cities and municipalities can't really do much to regulate these other than for health and safety reasons. And so there was a big impetus by Governor Ducey to encourage this market and encourage what's going on because it does provide significant tax revenues. It also provides an outlet for more tourism. And so
fair enough.
It's probably good for the economy, but it may not be great for existing homeowners.
One of the things we're seeing here on the real estate end, Patrick, is the short-term rentals are really putting extra pressure on the affordability side of the equation for Phoenix home buyers, because if you have a home that could rent for, let's say, $1,000 a month, yet that homeowner flips that to an Airbnb or a VRBO, a short-term rental, they might be able to get $75 or $100 a night out of that property, and it takes that property out of play. It takes it off the market, essentially. So a lot of positive things about short-term rentals, but it's also affecting home buyers in the Phoenix market. Are most of your clients, Patrick, are they on the kind of disrupted neighbor side, or are they on the landlord side of the equation?
Yeah, so they're on multiple sides, actually. So we've represented in the past angry homeowners who've been affected by, late night beer bottles breaking and parties. We've also represented some who have been targeted by angry neighbors and have had to come up with some sort of resolution. And then we also work on some of the investors. And so what we're seeing right now is a large influx of out-of-state investors who are coming in wanting to buy up large bulks of properties for this purpose, because they recognize that Arizona, in Arizona, the regulations, we just don't have much in relation to a lot of other tourist states. And so this is a fairly favorable economy for VRBOs. And I want to piggyback on something you mentioned, too, about the affordability issue. I don't know the answer to this, and I'd be curious to know. But, I've heard from multiple brokers out there that basically say VRBOs are good for resale values, and they actually increase resale values because people are coming from out of state, people are coming from all over to buy these. And so I don't know if anybody's ever done a study and sort of put those numbers together, but I'd be interested in whether the resale market is benefited by the ability to have a short-term rental. I just don't know the answer to that, because I've heard both sides. Some people say, well, this harms property values because we don't want the late night partying, and others say, well, no, this is great for the market because it increases values because it creates more desirability for investors. I just don't know the answer to that one.
And, more demand leads to higher prices, so that's fascinating. That's true. If someone is living in a neighborhood, an HOA, and they've got an Airbnb, a VRBO, a flip key, a share room property, a short-term rental next door, and they've done the kind neighbor thing and knocked on the door and tried to address the situation, and they can't, what are the next action steps for that person?
Unfortunately, it's calling the police. It's considering filing a nuisance-based lawsuit. It's considering filing, some sort of injunctive relief to get this use stopped. That's kind of what we're seeing right now, are a lot of injunctions or requests for injunctions, or we're filing requests for injunctions to get these things to stop. if they're out of control, and so we're defending them, we're prosecuting them, but it's really interesting because you can literally have a different interpretation from different judges of the laws of the CCNRs, and so there's not much consistency out there. So that's kind of problematic right now.
I see. It's kind of the Wild West here in Arizona right now with
that's right. That's definitely true.
With short-term rentals. Well, it's a fascinating topic, and I know that there are a lot of people out there who are looking for answers, and I wanted to bring you to them. If someone has a question about short-term rentals or they need to hire your services, what is the best way to find you, and where are you located on the internet?
Sure. So our website is www.mandglawgroup.com. You can email me, Patrick, at mandglawgroup.com. My direct line is 602-533-2838, and that's usually the easiest way to get in touch with me. We would need to run a quick conflict check to make sure that we don't run or represent any other parties in the matter.
Fair enough.
But before we chat, but that's really the extent of it. And like I said, we're working with. We see this from many angles. We've represented HOAs in this deal, in this situation. We represented out-of-state buyers. We've represented all sorts of. And the frustrating part is we just don't have any significant guidance at the moment.
And you had an interesting anecdote in a webinar that you led that I followed about a property owner who. There was a real estate transaction that was coming together, and the new buyer mentioned, I guess, to the neighbors that they were going to turn this into a short-term rental, and the neighbors influenced the transaction, and the transaction died. That's another angle that.
That's definitely what we're alleging. That's definitely another angle, and so we represented a homeowner who was attempting to sell her home. The neighbors put up some protest signs that said, "Hey, we don't want you to sell to a VRBO. There's plenty, or a VRBO owner. There's plenty of those in the neighborhood. We don't like what you're doing." And the allegation is that this angry homeowner approached the inspector and or the prospective buyer and interfered with the contract to such an extent that the contract was canceled. This seller then ended up having to go with a much lower offer. And lost some money on it. That one is currently being litigated. That to me is that's an interesting issue because it started with an Airbnb issue, and then now the allegation is that it led to an interference with contract claim, and so that's where this evolution sometimes goes with angry homeowners.
Yeah, wow. Lots of people on multiple sides of this. I guess not just two sides, multiple sides of this issue. Patrick, thank you for joining us here on the Arizona Report. I appreciate your time very much, and I'd like to have you back in a future episode as the law develops and there's more precedent. Maybe we can talk more about that in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Patrick. My name is David Meek, licensed Arizona real estate broker. If you'd like to see my thoughts on the Arizona real estate market, follow me at ArizonaReport.com. Or you can reach me here in the studio, 480-999-MOVE. That's 480-999-6683. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, we'll see you then.